Good evening, everyone. My name is Judy Blake, and I am a program coordinator for Family to Family Network here in Houston, Texas. We actually have people who are not in the greater Houston area joining us. So welcome. I know that it's been a long day and you've probably already had a long week, and it's only Wednesday and you have 2 more days to go, but I know you can do it. So we are very, very happy that you joined us tonight. We know that your schedules are very busy, your plate is overflowing. I want to introduce my colleague, Leslie Lawson, who is all-knowing, wonderful to work with. And if I could just put a little disk in her brain and do like a data dump, I would be so much better off because she has so much knowledge.
Thank you, Judy.
My pleasure. So I just want to go over a few housekeeping rules. This is about special education and what you need to know. Next slide, please. We are with Family to Family Network. We are a small nonprofit. I always call us tiny but mighty. And this is a very safe place. Please know there is no silly question. There's no ridiculous question. If you're one of those people that's really uncomfortable about asking a question to the group, don't worry. Private message to myself or to Leslie, and we will ask it anonymously on your behalf. Please know that we know there's a lot of information. We know that. We don't expect you to remember everything. We're going to be having session 2 a week from tonight at the same time on the 19th. And then our final session will be on October 26th. So please make sure that you mute yourself. We're going to hold questions until the end. Feel free to write them in the chat box, and you can do that as well, and we can ask it at the appropriate time. So Myrna or Anna Maria, if you could unmute yourselves, and to anyone who doesn't know how to do the interpretation, can you please share it with our group in case someone doesn't know how to get to you? Yes, I can. Thank you. Thank you so much, Anna Maria. Thank you. Thank you. So Anna Maria and Myrna Wallace are with Translingua. If you ever need interpretation services, they are fabulous. Our goal is to finish by about 7 o'clock, but we're not holding to that because sometimes people ask a lot of questions. We will try to answer them all this evening, but we want you to know that sometimes we know that these cases are very complex and the issues you have can be challenging. So we may say to you, let's email you and we're going to take it offline, and Leslie and I will help you in the next day or 2. You will be sent the slides when you are finished, or when we are finished, but it probably won't be for a couple of days. I won't be sending the slides probably until after the last session. There is going to be a survey. The survey link will be in the chat box, and it will also be at the end of the presentation. Please, 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 we ask you to complete the survey. It's how we learn. We want you to be honest, but also too, this is a grant-funded program. This is from the Methodist Foundation. And if we don't have feedback, then we may not get grant funded again, and we can't offer free training. So next slide, please. So we would like to know if you are a caregiver, if you could just type in the chat box. We just want to know who our audience is. Is your child birth to 5 years old, in elementary school, middle school, or high school? If you could please let us know that, we would appreciate it. I see 0 to 5, 18 plus. And if you want to private message me that, you can do that as well. Elementary. Okay, we have a 4-year-old. High school, very good. Any middle schoolers, junior high? Okay, so Leslie, that kind of gives us an idea. We have a little bit of everybody.
Is there anybody that's in ECI getting ready to transition to the early childhood program in the public school?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I saw that. I didn't see any private messages on that. I did see 4 years old. So I saw a 0 to 5. Yeah.
I just didn't want to waste time on the whole slide about ECI transition, so we can.
Oh, I do see here. Yes, there is a 2 to 3. Yes.
Oh, yes. My son is 4. I mean,
Great.
it's 3, and he's going 4 on December. So I'm getting him ready to go for the special educations. But right now we only registered, and we're waiting for the queue to call us. So
Okay.
Great. Yeah, and then we have another parent, Leslie, the same thing.
Okay, great.
But we'll make sure we cover that. Thank you so much. Next slide, please. So we know that there are so many abbreviations when it comes to special education. Just when I think I know all of the abbreviations, there's another one that crops up. We are going to be reviewing these abbreviations tonight and in future sessions. ECI stands for Early Childhood Intervention. ECSE is Early Childhood Special Education. Now, sorry, that was my 27-year-old who forgot I was doing the class. Sorry about that. So back when Ryan was young, they called it PPCD, Preschool Program for Children with Disabilities. But now they call it Early Childhood Special Education. Everything that Leslie and I are going to be talking about is Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And you're going to see IDEA. We're going to refer to the IDEA manual. We're going to tell you what does IDEA say. Keep in mind that this is federal law. And what this does is it makes sure that public schools are serving those needs, those educational needs of students with disabilities. So please know that what Leslie and I are talking about, it's not something that she and I are coming up with. It's not Harris County law or Fort Bend law. It is federal law. And that's what we want everybody to understand. The meetings that you have with the school district, Texas, of course, has to be different. Everywhere else, they're called IEP meetings, but in Texas, they call them ARDs, A-R-D, and that stands for Admission, Review, and Dismissal. I mentioned it just a minute ago, IEP. That's an individualized education plan. So keep in mind that when my son was in public school, he had an IEP, Leslie's son had an IEP. They may have some similarities, but they're going to be individualized. So for everyone on this call, it's important that you know that every IEP is going to be different and it's going to be individualized for your child. Functional behavioral assessment. That is something that is, some of you may not know, it's more if your child has some behavior challenges, the school might perform a functional behavioral assessment. And from that assessment, they will implement what we call a BIP, which is a behavioral intervention plan. So those are just some acronyms, some abbreviations that we're going to be referring to that you will see over and over and over again. Next slide, please. So remember on that previous slide, I talked about IDEA. And we can't stress this enough, why this matters. because the reason that we all are here this evening is to make sure that our children with disabilities, or if it's your niece, your nephew, or if you're the caregiver of someone, we want to make sure that they have available to them a free, appropriate public education. And that is going to emphasize those special education and related services, because we want to make sure that your needs are met and that those are those unique needs. So the purpose of IDEA is to prepare your loved one for further education, employment, and independent living. That is the purpose. Next slide, please. So what happens when your child turns 3 years old? And I realize that, you know, some of your kids are already 8, 9 years old or in high school. But what's going to happen when your child turns 3 years old? They're no longer in ECI, and ECI again is early childhood intervention, and that's from birth to 3 years old. And what's going to happen is your ECI service coordinator, they must conduct a planning meeting. And that planning meeting will happen for transition. And it's going to happen at least 90 days before your child turns 3.
Captain.
It's going to happen somewhere between 90 days, but not more than 9 months. And the reason for this meeting is to make sure that parents are able to meet the school district personnel. So the parent, you can have your child's therapist, either your speech therapist, your occupational therapist, whoever you want, and your ECI service coordinator. They're going to meet with the school district personnel, and you're going to have that transition meeting. And you can invite other people, but it's generally not the case. Usually it's just your ECI service coordinator, the parent, and the school. Your introductory meeting. So your ECI service coordinator should be developing a plan, and it's going to help with that transition from ECI to early childhood special education. So it will help you figure out who is eligible for special education services. The ECI coordinator will help you learn about accessing those services and then exploring any options. And they're going to help you determine what other needs you should be considering for your loved one. And if your child might be eligible for special education services, they must refer your child to the local school district with your consent. I think it's really important that parents on this call realize that nothing can be done without your consent. And that's something that Leslie and I are going to be stressing to you over and over again. And we're doing that because we want you to know what your rights are. Next slide, please.
Oh, there's something there at the bottom.
Thank you. Thank you. I just saw that. Thanks, Leslie. So one of the documents that you can see is through Navigate Life Texas, which is a really great website. And there's the link there. And you can copy and paste it well, you won't be able to copy and paste it, but we'll be sending you the slides. And but it explains to you what that transition process looks like. So the timeline is really important here. The school just can't decide what they want to do when they want to do it. According to federal law, when the school receives notice from your ECI service coordinator, they must evaluate your child within 45 school days of receiving the notice. So keep in mind, say you decide to tell the school December 2nd, and let's just say that's a Monday. You've got that part of December But don't forget, you've got those 2 weeks of winter break. Well, that doesn't count against the school. So probably the school will not maybe be doing it until sometime in January or even early February, but they have 45 school days from when they receive that notice. And what they're going to conduct is what we call a full and individual evaluation. It's called an FIE. And what they're going to do is evaluate in every area of suspected disability. So if there's something that you're not sure about, like say you feel their speech is delayed or continues to be delayed, maybe they were getting ECI services for speech, but maybe now you're wondering if they're on the autism spectrum. Maybe there's something with social skills. Maybe there's something with fine motor. Maybe there's gross motor issues. You want to make sure that you put in writing every area that you want your child tested in. So the school is going to complete that full and individual evaluation, and they must hold that ARD meeting that we talked about, and they're going to discuss that IEP, that individual education plan. And that must be done within 30 days of the evaluation being completed. So it's really important that you understand that when the school receives that consent from the ECI provider and from the parent, they have 45 days from that date, school days. And then once they complete the evaluation, they must have that meeting with you as a parent 30 days from that date, 30 school days. And if your child is transitioning from ECI into public school and your child qualifies for those special education services, they must allow your child to start school on their 3rd birthday. So that means 3 years old. So it's just important that you realize what your rights are there. Next slide, Leslie, unless you'd like to add something. Okay. And I see someone added a comment. We'll look at that shortly. Thank you so much. We want this to be interactive. We want to hear your feedback. That's really important for other parents to hear as well. So timelines for children who are not in ECI. So maybe you didn't receive any services in your home. Maybe you're new to Houston. Maybe you thought your child was progressing just fine and you thought everything was typically developing, and then you realized at 3 years old, oh my goodness, they really are maybe a little bit behind and I want an evaluation. So what you would do is you would request an evaluation to see if your child is eligible for special education services. If there is, well, there's a lot of things Leslie and I want you to take away from this, but one of the things we want you to take away is that everything must be in writing. I cannot stress how important that is, because if it's not in writing, the school may never receive it and you have no paper trail. And it's really important that you keep those records as well, because you want to have a file started for your child. So you would email the school, your local home zoned school, and tell them that you believe your child might have some disabilities and you want an evaluation done. Once the school receives your written request, they have 15 school days to provide you with an opportunity to provide written consent for that full individual evaluation, that FIE that I referred to in the last slide. And that they're going to evaluate in every area of suspected disability. Now, if for some reason the school says, nope, we don't need to conduct an evaluation, then they must provide you a notice of their procedural safeguards. And they must explain to you your rights under the law and why they will not evaluate your child. Chances are a school is not going to do that. Chances are they are going to evaluate your child. but we just want to make sure that you realize that it must be in writing, and they have 15 days to provide you with that authorization so that you have that full and individual evaluation completed.
That's school days.
Yes, school days. Thank you, Leslie. Absolutely. And then they have 45 school days to conduct the evaluations after the parent signs that consent. They then have 30 calendar days to have that ARD IEP meeting after the evaluations are completed. And what's going to happen at that meeting is that you're going to review the results, you're going to determine eligibility, and you're going to develop that individualized education plan if the child is eligible. And I know that this is a lot of numbers that we're throwing at you and a lot of timelines. Probably what I'm going to do, because our next presentation is not until a week from now, I probably will send the slides to you by the end of the week while it's fresh in your mind, so that you do have questions and that you can refer back to the slides. Next slide, please. What parents need to remember. You want to always keep copies of all written documents. And something I want to mention before I forget is, I think that our teachers try really, really hard to help our kids. No one is going into special ed to make a fortune, retire early, and be a millionaire. No one is. And I don't believe, in my personal opinion, that there's any such thing as a good or bad school district. I don't think there's anything as a good or bad school. I think what matters is the teacher that your child has and how your child connects with the teacher. The class makeup, the other kids in the class, how does your child get along with them? So all of those things are really important. One of the things that we do at Family to Family Network is we really encourage parents to be educated so they feel empowered, so they can advocate for their child and pass on those advocacy skills to their child. And we encourage parents to work collaboratively with the schools. So keep in mind that anyone can make a referral for an evaluation. Maybe your speech therapist decides to. Just keep in mind, if someone else is doing it, the school still must get that written consent from you, the parent. Nothing can be done without your consent. So you should be a part. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, I got out of order there. Anyone can make a referral for that evaluation. And there's another term we're going to throw at you, and it's called a READ. And that stands for Review of Existing Evaluation Data. So what we're referring to there is that any initial evaluation about your child, it has to include data. It has to include that. Hold on, I just need to mute someone, my apologies. There we go. So when the school receives that request for that initial evaluation, it's important that you know that they are going to be looking at existing data. A READ is not an evaluation. A READ just means they're looking at existing data. What you're looking for is new testing. You want a fresh set of tests done for your child. You have the right to ask what examinations or tests are being used. How are they going to be used to develop that individualized education program for your child? And the school must send you written notice when they recommend or decline a full initial and individual evaluation, or if they're suggesting just a screening instead of that FIE. So you do have rights, and it's important that you know those rights. Again, the school must have your written consent before completing any evaluation. And I know that there's some people on this call who are, they're not parents, They either work for agencies or other organizations. And it's important that if you have someone who does not speak English, maybe they need something to be in a different language, they can request that it be in their native language. They have to understand what they're agreeing to. You have those due process rights in every step of the special education process. Next slide, please. So what areas of need might be evaluated? And it's really different for each child. I think that some of the most common are going to be speech therapy, fine motor, we talked about that, gross motor. Autism is huge today, absolutely huge. And the people that are going to be doing these evaluations, generally they're called LSSPs, and that's a licensed specialized school psychologist. And what they do is they are going to evaluate your child in areas of suspected disability that you have told them about, maybe someone else has told them about. Let your pediatrician know what's going on. If your pediatrician says, no, everything's fine. I mean, that's what I was told with my son. Oh, he's a boy, boys mature later. I'm like, something isn't right here. But my sons are much older now. Hopefully we know more today than we did 27 years ago. Maybe you want IQ tested. Look at their reading, look at their social skills. Are they getting along with their peers? Do they seem anxious? All of those things you want to be tested. So it's really important that you know what areas they plan to evaluate, because you don't want them to miss an area that you are concerned about. But again, put it in writing. Next slide, please.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about that too, about why we're doing these. Like today is a very good example. I had a parent call in, their child 6 years old, started school at the beginning of the school year. They were new to the area. The child went to school for 1 week, and then the school told the parents, come pick your child up. He needs a special education evaluation and he can't come back to school till we do that in December. So that child's been sitting at home since the first of school year because the parents didn't know that that's totally goes against everything. So that's just one example of why you need to know your rights. Every day we get calls and parents will say, well, the school told me this or the school told me that. And then when we tell the parents that that's not what the IDEA says, that's not what the law says, they just can't believe it. And I'm not trying to say that the people are trying to tell you what something that's not right, but sometimes they just don't know, because sometimes the training doesn't trickle down to the campuses and to everybody that needs to know. And also wanted to mention that for speech and OT, it's not going to be the LSSP for that. It'll be a licensed speech pathologist. And
thank you for clarifying that. Yeah.
Occupational therapist.
Thank you. Thank you, Leslie. I appreciate that.
Are you ready for me?
Yes, and before you continue, the person who is 200-415-026, if you private message me the name that you registered with, I would really appreciate it.
Sure, thank you.
Okay. Let's see.
And I see some messages in the chat box, and please know that we will be getting to those questions when Leslie is finished. Thank you so much.
So we're going to talk about some of your rights during the evaluation process. And I can't recommend the IDEA parent manual enough. We gave you that link on one of the slides, but it's very parent friendly. I used it, I tabbed pages, I underlined stuff, I brought it with me to every meeting. You can see more on your evaluation rights on page 33 in the manual. So be sure and look over that. But you do have a right to be given written notice before the school evaluates or refuses to evaluate. You have to consent to the evaluation, and at that time you're going to see what areas they're going to evaluate. So if they're missing an area, that's when you can say, hey, what about this? You know, what about speech, or what about assistive technology or something? So it's really important that you look at any notices that they send you and ask for your signature. You need to know what you're signing off on. So don't just sign off on everything they send home. You need to know what you're signing. You have a right to be given information about all abilities, skills, and knowledge areas that they're going to evaluate in. You have a right to be given descriptions and explanations of the procedures and the test and the reports and how they're going to be used. And they might not do all of this. You may have to ask, because some parents don't ask for all of this. So, but it's good to stay on top of that. Because you're going to be in there when they make the decision whether or not your child qualifies, and you're a very important part of the ARD committee. You know, they can't, like we said, they can't do something or not do something unless you let them. You have a right to be given a copy of the evaluation report before the ARD meeting. I recommend that if they don't give you that you email them and ask for that in an email or in writing. And I would never go to an ARD meeting without having already looked at that evaluation report, because you don't want to go in there and be lost, because they're going to be going through it and you're like, you don't want to be surprised at something they found, or you want to have as much information as they have, because you're the most important member of the ARD committee. You have a right to have all the evaluations and information considered at the meeting, and also any outside information that you bring in, they have to consider it too. Like if your child's getting private speech or private OT, so they do have to consider all information. And of course, to have everything in your native language, and the same for your child. So, you know, you wouldn't want to test a child in a different language than their primary language. And they shouldn't base your child's eligibility just on one thing. So it shouldn't be, oh, just an IQ test. It should be on any area that you're concerned about. And you want to make sure that they're using, you know, appropriate evaluations. So I really like this website. It's the Texas Autism Target Manual. And the reason I like it, and even if your child doesn't have autism, you can go to this site and look up all the different types of evaluations and probably find the ones that they're going to do on your child. And it just kind of gives you a rundown of what age group it's for, what they're going to look at, and things like that. I think that's really important. When my son was evaluated, he was nonverbal, and they did a verbal IQ test on him. And had I looked that up, I would have said, hey, you know, why are you using, this is not the right test, IQ test for him. So they also have good interventions in all different areas. So it's not just for autism. I mean, it's mainly for autism, but there's all different areas: reading, social skills, all kind of different things. So if you think the school's evaluation is incomplete or wrong, or maybe you just don't agree that it's a good picture of your child, you have rights. So you can ask the school to do more testing. You really want to get as much done when you first agree to let them test, though, because the timelines are intact where this is going to drag it out further. So, but if you need more testing, you can ask for it. If you don't agree with the evaluations or the recommendations based on their evaluations, you can ask for an IEE, an independent education evaluation. So it doesn't have to be the whole thing necessarily. Maybe they did a speech and language therapy evaluation and they only want to give your child 20 minutes of speech in a group once a week or something like that, and you don't feel like that's appropriate. You can ask for an independent evaluation at the school's expense. You have to put that in writing. There's very good sample letters in the IDEA manual. And the IEE is done by a qualified person who is not employed by the school. They'll probably give you a list. You don't necessarily have to choose somebody off their list, but you do have to choose somebody that has the appropriate credentials, and they'll probably have some other parameters like they don't want to pay somebody to travel, so they have to be in a certain radius of the area. So things like that. The school has to grant the independent evaluation, or if they don't, they have to take you to due process to show that their evaluation is good and appropriate. But generally speaking, the school always grants the IEE most times because it's a lot more it costs the school a lot more to take you to due process. So they'd rather just go ahead and let you have an independent evaluation. So we really encourage you to meet with somebody at the school before the meeting to discuss goals and learn more about the school's curriculum for your child's grade level. So you're all on the same page when you go to the meeting. Maybe they have developed some IEP goals, and maybe you have ideas for some that are important, that you feel are important to your child. Another example from just today was a parent, their child's IEP, they only had functional goals. They didn't have any academic goals. So I was very surprised in that. So it's really important for you to be a big part of all of this. The ARD meeting has to be scheduled at a time and date that works for you and the school. So they can't just say, oh, here's the date and the time, and you don't have any say in that. Throw out some dates and times that work for you, but it must be scheduled at a mutually agreed upon time. Let them know if you need an interpreter, and if you do, they do have to provide an interpreter. Make sure to request copies of all the evaluation reports, draft copies of your child's present levels, draft copies of the IEP goals and objectives. If some schools automatically do that, but not all. So, when you get the notice for the ARD meeting, that's when you want to make sure and send them a little email and say, I need to have copies of all of these reports and draft copies of the IEPs before the ARD meeting, so you can be an equal member of the ARD.
And if I could just add something, we realize that it's really challenging at the ARD meetings. Leslie and I have had to do this many times, and just know that these are your rights. This is your child. If you don't advocate for them, who will? And it's important that you feel comfortable. I realize you may not want to inconvenience anyone, but if your language is Mandarin or Farsi or Hindi or something like that, then you need to have that information in your native language. Houston is very, very diverse. We're one of the most diverse areas in the country. So they can get it done. It may take a little more time, but it's important that you're comfortable.
Very good point, Judy. I recommend that you bring somebody that knows your child to the meeting, if it's your spouse or a good friend, or maybe one of their outside therapists, if they have like a speech therapist or something that's outside that can come. It really helps to have somebody there with you, because there's going to be a whole table of them, and just somebody to take notes, to keep you on track, to remind you to say, can you put that in the minutes if they say they're going to do something or they won't do something. So it's really helpful to have another person there with you if you can. And you always want to make sure all required members of the ARD committee are at the meeting. Sometimes they'll ask you to excuse somebody, and if it's not, you know, if you think it's okay, that's fine, you can do that. There's a list in the IDEA handbook on page 31 about who's required to be there. You know, if your child's going to be included in regular ed, you definitely want to have the regular ed teacher there. So that's just one example. So we talked, Judy talked a little bit about them giving you your procedural notice, your procedural safeguards. And it's a different handbook than the IDEA manual, but I really like this one too, because it makes some things more clear. But the procedural safeguards tells you about prior written notice, and we told you where to find that. And basically what that says is you have a right to information in writing when the school proposes to do something or refuses to do something, whether it's regarding them identifying your child for special education, anything during the evaluation, placement, like where's your child going to receive their special education services, and how their free and appropriate public education is provided. So these procedural safeguards are very important for you to know, and they have to always put that in writing. So a lot of times parents will call me up and say, well, the school told me he couldn't have that, or we couldn't do that, or he couldn't be in regular ed. Well, they have to put that in writing. They have to put how they came to that decision, and they can't do that unless you agree, or if you disagree at the meeting and you choose to not use your procedural safeguards. So they give you these procedural safeguards for a reason. Please be sure and read over it. You know, I know it's a lot of reading, but you'll be so glad. You'll be empowered to be the best advocate for your child, and it'll make such a big difference. I always say my child ended up getting so much more in public school than a lot of other children because I knew my rights and I knew how to advocate. Now, I hate that it's that way, but the more you know, the more you're going to get for your child. So this just talks a little more about prior written notice, the action the school proposes to do or refuses to do, why they're making the decision, what data they use to make that decision, other choices they considered. And again, this notice should be in your native language.
Can I mention one thing real quick?
Yeah, go ahead, Judy.
And if you already mentioned it, I apologize. So I know sometimes, like, I had really great relationships with my son's teachers. I was very, very fortunate. I can think of a couple of teachers I think should have retired, but for the most part, they were really, really terrific teachers. And I was so grateful to all of them. My son graduated from Houston Independent School District. And sometimes, like if I was picking up my son early to go to an appointment, or maybe I, saw them in carpool line, what have you, and they might have verbally told me something. That's okay. But what I would always do is follow up with an email to confirm what they said. Because a conversation in the carpool line, or when I pick up my son, or say I decided to join him for lunch and the teacher mentioned something to me, that doesn't count. It's what's in writing. So if the teacher says, oh yeah, we'll get that taken care of, or if you email them a question and then they call you, that's fine if they want to call you and explain the situation. But I would always follow it up with an email and say, hey, I just want to make sure that I understood what you told me correctly. Did you say ... And then please confirm, just so I know that we're all on the same page. Thank you.
That is so important what Judy just said, because a lot of times when you put it back in writing to them and ask them to confirm it in writing, a lot of times what parents get, and sometimes maybe we hear something differently than what they say, but a lot of times they'll say, oh, I'm sorry, Miss Judy, you misunderstood what I said. So
exactly. And that's happened to me.
Yeah.
Everybody, you're distracted. We're all human.
Yeah. So get it in writing, who, what, when, where, why, and how. So when you're developing your child's IEP goals and objectives, you're always, of course, you've already had the evaluation done. And once you have a good evaluation that everybody agrees on, then you're going to develop the PLAF, the present levels of academic and functional performance. So the present levels are going to tell you where the child is starting from. It's going to take all the evaluation data, any information that the parents or other people have provided, so we know where is that child starting from. What can they do now? What do they have trouble with? How do they do things? You cannot develop good goals and objectives without a good PLAF. So you want to make sure the PLAF is an accurate picture of your child, and you want to read over it, because that's the starting point. I saw this week I saw a child's IEP, and it was a young child just going in from, I don't think they were in ECI, but they had been referred and they qualified. They did the evaluation and they said, well, the child's never been in school, so we're not going to do a PLAF. And I'm like, no. The evaluation they did gives you information from the PLAF. The parent, you could read in the IEP all the information the parent had given them about, oh, my child can do this, my child can do that, this is how they do it, they have trouble doing this. So they developed an IEP without a PLAF. Well, that's really impossible. That's kind of like me going to Weight Watchers and them not weighing me and not measuring my BMI. So they'd never know where I'd started from. And so once I implemented the Weight Watchers program 6 weeks later, how would I know if I had made appropriate progress? Because we didn't know where I started from, So that's really important. And so they build on each other. So you got your present levels. From that, where you have your evaluation, you develop your present levels, you develop your annual goals, and you're going to have academic and functional goals, and short-term objectives also. And so that's the order it goes in. And then you're also going to have like the supplementary aids and services, like, does the child need in-class support? Do they need assistive technology? Do they need speech therapy or OT? And how is all this going to help them access the general ed curriculum? Because all students are expected to make progress on the general ed curriculum at their level. We're not comparing anybody to anybody else. So And this is just, I like this visual of that. It's the building blocks of the IEP, and you start down at the bottom. And so I just wanted to share that because that helps me remember when you go into an ARD meeting, you're not going to start out by talking about placement. You know, you're going to start down. Here's the evaluation. Here's the present levels. Here's the goals and objectives, the supplementary aids and services. And then after we figure all that, we're going to talk about where the child's going to be placed to receive their services. And Judy already talked about a read not being an evaluation. And I bring this up because a child has to be considered to be reevaluated at least once every 3 years. So the read is definitely an important part of any evaluation. But what we see a lot is when they get ready to do the 3-year reeval, or maybe your child's made a lot of progress or not making progress, you can't ask for a new evaluation more than once a year. And you probably wouldn't want to do it every year, but at least every 3 years, they're going to look and they're going to do a read and see if the child needs to be reevaluated in any area. A read is not any new evaluation. It's regurgitation of previous evaluation and then updating it based on the data they collected and any new information. So a lot of times people think, yeah, we had our three-year reeval, but they didn't get any evaluation report except the read. So they're thinking that the school reevaluated their child, but they really didn't do any new formal evaluation. Not that it always needs to be done, but I just want you to know the difference. I know we had somebody in high school, maybe not middle school. So when you get around to the age of 14, you're going to start talking about transition. And so we're always preparing the student for life after high school. And so at 14, you're going to have a transition plan that's part of the IEP. And it's going to talk about goals for what they want to do after high school in the area of independent living, employment, and higher education. And also going to talk to you about how they're going to graduate by IEP, or just like another student, what classes they're going to take to graduate. You know, at 18, do the parents need to get legal guardianship, or can they do a supported decision-making agreement? And, you know, with graduation, students can walk with their graduation class at 18 and come back for more services. All of the schools have 18+ programs. So just wanted to touch a little bit on that. And if any of you have students that have a transition plan in your IEP and would like information on that to start getting prepared for that, please email me or Judy, and we'll get you set up with all that information. And this is just a form like helping you think about training, education, employment, and independent living. And I know like some of you have a hard time thinking about what that's going to look like. You know, like Judy's son, he did not go on to college, but he is working. And my son did not go to college or a program for students with intellectual disabilities, but he is going to a day program. But there are certain skills he had to have to get into that really good day program where they're not just sitting around being babysat. So whatever it is that, and your transition plan can change from year to year. So it's nothing set in stone, but you would do it each year when you have your annual IEP. So IEP considerations. So there are some things that they're going to consider for all students, and that would be things like assistive technology, extended school year, graduation. And then there are going to be some things that specific disabilities students with specific disabilities, they'll consider like, does the child have autism, or do they have behaviors that interfere with learning, communication, limited English, visual impairment, or deaf and hard of hearing. So those are just want you to kind of have an overview of things to think about. For students on the autism spectrum, you're going to have something called an Autism Supplement in your IEP. If you have a child with autism and you don't know what your child's autism supplement says, that's a big problem, because I know that some schools just skim over it. But these are 11 extra protections for students on the autism spectrum that they have to consider. And this autism supplement should be very specific to your child's needs. And this is where you can get a lot of extra things taken care of if they're needed. So it shouldn't have just cookie cutter information dropped in there. And if anybody has a child with autism, I'd be happy to share my son's autism supplement. Not that it would be right for your child, but you could see how specific it is to him. And that's what you want your child's autism supplement to look like too. It should be very specific to your child in all of these areas. And then if you have a student who has behaviors that interfere with their learning, you may need to ask for a functional behavioral assessment. And a lot of times an informal one is done by the teacher. Well, just remember, teachers are not trained in behavior. So if the teacher does one and it works, that's great. But if your student is still having behavioral challenges, you want to ask for a formal functional behavioral assessment to be done by a qualified professional like an LSSP or a BCBA. And they're going to come in and observe the child and look at what happens right before the behavior, during the behavior, how everybody responds to the behavior. And then they're going to develop a behavior intervention plan and hopefully train the people that work with your child how to implement the behavior intervention plan. A lot of times I see behavior intervention plans that were developed and nobody's doing it. Nobody's actually following the recommendations from this qualified professional. So a lot of times we see, not even just with behavior, with IEPs, somebody can have a great IEP and it could look like everything we've already talked about, but it's really important that you know that it's being implemented. You go up and observe your child in the different settings. So you make sure, if your child's in regular ed and is supposed to have in-class support, is that really happening? It's really hard if you have a child that can't tell you all of those things. So it's always good if you can volunteer up at school. You'll get a good idea of what's going on. Volunteer for the PTA, PTO, schedule a time to go up and observe the classroom. You don't interfere or anything, just observe and see what's going on. You may be pleasantly surprised, or you may say, uh-oh, I need to have another IEP meeting and get some things fixed. I really think it's very important that the person doing the functional behavioral assessment and helping the ARD committee develop the behavior intervention plan has a strong background in behavior. Not really going to talk a lot about STAR test, but starting in 3rd grade, there's the state STAR test. Some students with disabilities take the regular STAR test with the allowable accommodations that are allowed for all students. Sometimes they take an online test that has built-in accommodations, or for students with really significant disabilities, they'll take STAR Alt, which is totally different. So that will be part of the IEP when you're planning for 3rd grade and up. Okay, least restrictive environment. So IDEA says that all children in special ed must be educated in the least restrictive setting appropriate to their individual needs. So in the spirit of the Individuals with Disabilities Act, to the maximum extent appropriate, children with disabilities should be educated with their non-disabled peers. Special classes, separate schools, or removal of children with disabilities from the regular education environment occurs only if the nature or severity of the disability is so much that they can't make appropriate progress in the regular ed classroom with all the supplementary aids and services allowed. And really that should be tried first. We don't see that a lot. So it's really important for you to know that, because if your child is in, and it doesn't have to be all or nothing, but if your child is in a segregated class with only other students with disabilities, you know, they're not going to be exposed to the same curriculum. They're not going to have appropriate models for speech and social skills and language. They're not going to have the same expectations for behavior and all of that. So you want them in the least restrictive environment as much as possible. So your child can, you know, we're not raising our kids to go live in an institution, right? So why would we want to put them in a segregated setting all day, every day at school? Because then how are they going to be ready for life after high school in the real world? So just keep that in mind. And like I said, it's not all or nothing. And what's right for your child, what's right for Judy's child was not right for my child. And it doesn't have to be the same for everybody. But just remember, the expectations are higher. If you start out in a very segregated setting, you're not, or we deciding that young that child's not going to be on the path to go to college or community college or a vocational school or something. So just keep that in mind. And that also applies to preschool. Some people think it doesn't. So we have the early childhood or PPCD program in the school, but remember, special education is a service, not a place. Some students go to their regular neighborhood or church preschool and only get speech and OT through the public school. Some kids go half day to the public school program and then go half day to their church preschool. Some students do ABA therapy half a day and do the preschool program. Some students that are 4, even 3 too, might be in pre-K with support instead of in the early childhood special education class. So special education and related services can be provided in a variety of settings. And during that time, from 3 to 5, they have what's called dual enrollment, in which children can stay home or attend private preschool at the family's expense while still receiving some special education and related services through the district. After 5, it's allowed for students with autism because they did pass a law on that, but after 5, you can't really do that, the dual enrollment, unless your child is on the autism spectrum in most cases. Some kids go to Head Start instead of going to the school's special education program. And the reason for that is if they're in the program that they would be in if they didn't have a disability, that's where you want to try to start, but with the appropriate supports in place. Head Start is required to have 10% of the student population as children with disabilities. So Head Start does accept students with disabilities in their program. And then I already talked about pre-K. A friend of mine, her daughter didn't go to the early childhood PPCD program. She went to the pre-K program on the same campus and had in-class support. So lots of options for students, and special education, again, is a service. It's not a place.
Something I'd like to add as well is that if your loved one goes to a charter school, they are required by law to follow what we're talking about. Sometimes I think a school, Leslie, gosh, I don't know why your computer's making all those red marks.
I don't know where
That
that
is so
from.
weird. Anyway, but charter schools must follow this as well. So if a school, be it charter or public school, says, gosh, we want to be able to do this, but we either don't have the staff, we don't have the funding. If it's in the ARD minutes and was approved by the ARD committee, they have to make it happen. We know that's not easy. I get it, but they have to make it happen. Go ahead, Leslie.
I'm sorry, I don't know where those red marks are coming from.
No worries.
So always have high expectations for your students, and just remember you're a very important part of the decision-making process, and you want to familiarize yourself with the curriculum. We have pre-K because I think we were doing that. I missed that. We were doing this for the kids coming from ECI. Yeah, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, sorry about that. And don't worry, when you get the slides, they won't have those red marks.
Yeah, this one's, I don't know what is happening here.
Yeah.
And this was all about preschool age kids, but transportation is also a related services for kids with who are receiving special education services. And that should be a discussion in the IEP meeting. And the district is obligated to provide transportation services in most cases. I know some schools have, if you live in a certain radius of the school, you don't get transportation, but that's for children without disabilities. So not that every child is going to get transportation services, but if it's needed, they do get that. And this is just something you're going to see on your paperwork is, these numbers that tell you how much your child is in regular education, or if they're in a self-contained class for more than 60% of the day. It's really important, and it's going to take time. We're telling you a lot of stuff, and we don't expect you to know this overnight, but I will say, if you see something in the IEP paperwork and you don't know what it means, be sure and ask what it means. Because a lot of times parents think that something's going to happen one way, and then these numbers tell a different story. So if you don't understand something, be sure and ask. So we're going to talk a lot more about what to do when you don't agree in our last session, but just remember, at the end of every ARD meeting, you have to sign your name and check one of two boxes, agree or disagree. Of course, we should always work together with the ARD committee to come to an agreement, but if you don't understand something or you don't agree with something in the IEP document, then you shouldn't be checking agree. Now, we don't want to go in there and disagree about every little thing. You know, you want to work together, but if it's something important, don't check the agree box. And if you check the disagree box, you need to know what to do once you disagree. Because if a lot of parents will say, oh, well, I disagreed with that. And I'm like, okay, what did you do next? Did you use your procedural safeguards? And they're like, well, no. Well, if you check disagree and don't take the next step, that's the same thing as agreeing with them. Because if you disagree and do nothing, the school gets to do what they think is best. So that's why it's so important to know your rights. And the IEP is a legal document. So you wouldn't go to the bank and sign your name on a loan if you didn't know the terms of the loan. So don't be signing your name to this legal document unless you understand it and agree with it. And again, we give you the IDEA hand manual, and they have it in English and Spanish. And the procedural safeguards they have in every language. So we gave you that link too.
So please make sure that you complete the survey. I don't know that the QR code is going to work because of the marks, but I've also put the survey link in the chat box. Please, please, please complete the survey, because I want to be able to send you the slides, but if only 2 or 3 people have completed the survey, I can't do it. So, and I'll be emailing you the survey link again as well. So there's a couple of questions. Leslie, thank you so much. That was just great information as always. And, you know, I've been doing this for a long time, and every time I hear Leslie, I learn something new. So many thanks to Leslie. So a couple of things that I wanted to mention to you. And I'm going through here. Hold on one second. Where was it? Ariel wrote a great comment at the beginning. I just went through this process and I had to advocate for my child throughout the entire process. Go, Ariel. I literally had to fight for them to meet these deadlines. We had our first ARD meeting 3 days before my child turned 3, and they gave us pushback to start when he turned 3 because it was the end of the school year. You know, Ariel, I applaud you. My son turned 3 in March, the end of March. It was like after spring break, and he still started. And you had every right to do that because it was something that at least he got exposed to. So I applaud you for doing that.
And they might need ESY too.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. Good
The
point,
only other
Leslie.
thing I'll add, this is Ariel, is I appreciate everything you guys are saying. I know you've gone through this yourselves and
Oh,
you're
yeah.
saying what all of your rights are, but I'm just saying, like, what, you know, having just gone through this, just because it's your
Yep.
rights, and this is like for other parents, just because it's your rights doesn't mean that it's gonna be easy. Like,
You're right.
literally
I agree with you.
everything you are saying, I had to fight, and I mean fight, to get everything. And I think that that's just a huge challenge. And like, I wish that I had done this program a year ago and had known this before I went through it, but I literally went through everything already. And
But now you're prepared for other things, and you'll
Yeah.
be shocked at what we teach you the next 2 Wednesdays. And I know what you're saying. I really do. And I think that so much of that has to do with the training. If people aren't trained properly, they don't know what they don't know. And it's a shame that you had to fight so hard. You shouldn't have to fight for things that are your rights.
Right.
And
right.
we agree with you. Someone else had mentioned, may I request copies of your evaluation? I think you meant to say your child's evaluation. And if I don't agree with something, I can disagree, or I have to wait for the ARD meeting. Leslie, I think what mom means to say, and please private message me again to clarify this, but she wants to know the evaluation results before they're given to the ARD committee. And if she doesn't agree with something, if she doesn't agree, does she have to wait until the ARD meeting?
Well, you should, if you got the evaluation report, I would take my copy and mark it up, anything that you don't think is a good picture of your child, and maybe discuss it with the diagnostician before the meeting. Maybe she'll sit down with you, but that is the evaluator's view of your child, you know? So I don't know, they're not going to change the evaluation report, but you get to add what you see too. You know,
Yes.
different kids do different things with different people, right? But make sure when you're developing the PLAF, the present levels, you talk about what your child can, what you see your child being able to do. And like I said, if you don't agree, if you don't feel like the evaluation is a good picture of your child, you do have the right to ask the school to pay for an independent evaluation. It's like getting a second opinion. And they do, once that is done, they do have to consider that. So definitely, you know, and make sure that everything you think is different is documented somewhere in the IEP. A lot of times that'll be documented in the minutes or in the PLAF. You know, they may add it to the PLAF. Well, mom says that he can do this or that, you know, so yeah, I mean, it's not, you're not going to like everything that they say about your child. It's, you know,
Exactly.
and they're not going to see the same things they see that you see, because your child's going to be a lot more comfortable with you and the family and at the home and things like that.
Another parent mentioned her daughter goes to a charter school and they don't have transportation for free. We have to pay for it. What can I do? So I would reach out to us about that, because unless you live really far away from the school, or if something doesn't make sense there, you
Yeah,
should.
I'll have to look that up. Because
I'd have to look that up as well. So if you could email us about that, just because it's late in the day and we don't want to forget, but email us about that so we can research that. Because I know sometimes with charter schools, you're choosing to go there. It's not like it's your home zone school where they must provide transportation. So please email us that question so we can research it and get back to you. I think I got everything else. I put the survey link again in there. Please complete it. I'm sorry that we ran over. I know we got started a little bit late, but most of you still stayed on, which I think is fantastic. And I'll make a deal with you. If everyone completes the survey, I'll send you those PowerPoint slides by Friday. Yay! Just in time for your weekend reading.
I did mine already, so.
Oh, thank you, Ty. Thank you.
and was that
You get the gold
Ariel?
star. And no, that was Ty.
No, was that Ariel that shared a while ago about just going through?
Yes.
Yes, yeah. I really like it when you guys share your experience, because
Absolutely.
to hear
And we
from
hear
a
it all the
parent-
time from
Yeah.
family, but we
Yeah.
like to hear it in person and
Mhm.
for the other people to hear. And I'd love to say, hey, it gets better, but oh my gosh, trying to get adult services sometimes, it's not supposed to be this difficult. And it is, you know, and
Well,
it's just,
and that's a good, what Ariel was that, I think it was Ariel, what she said is a very good example of she had to fight, but her child got so much more. And I hate to use the word fight because she wasn't in there really duking it out, but she was in there advocating very aggressively for her child and still being nice about it. And because of that, her child probably got way more, and the timelines were followed because of her advocating like that.
and hopefully future families will benefit from that. And
I
the child will certainly benefit.
exactly.
I think
Once the school knows that you're that parent, they tend to do more the next time because they don't want you coming at them like that again. So, but you always have to be prepared and stay on your toes. Don't get complacent. Every year you got to prepare.
Absolutely. Well, we know that it's late. Y'all have had a long day. We thank you so much for joining us. Again, please complete the survey. I will send the slides and you'll be getting my reminder emails for next Wednesday, 6 o'clock Central Time. And thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Have a great evening.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.